In reviewing the different D&D classes that you can play, we've arrived at the Rogue. And what I find interesting about the Rogue, aka Thief, a thief-based character drawing on that narrative from previous editions of Dungeons and Dragons, there's a lot more, or I should say there's the potential for a lot more complexity to this character. A lot of different builds, a lot of different ways you can go. And in my experience, both as a player and as a DM, what influences the Rogue the most is the adventure or the campaign that you're finding yourself playing. Now, I'm not saying that playing a fighter or a monk or a cleric is one-dimensional. I mean, there is this perception in some groups where playing a fighter is easy. Jack the hit points, jack the attack dice, and just go out and deal as much damage. It's not quite as easy as that. But I think when we look at the roles of different character classes, when we get to the wizard, a wizard, or I should say an arcane class, could be sorcerer too, a wizard and a rogue have a couple of things in common. And I think some of the ways to approach a wizard build is similar to a rogue build. Okay, let's elaborate on that a little bit. If you're playing a wizard, your access, of course, beyond skill points, your spells. The ability to cast spells to interact with the dungeon master and interact with the game. Literally using the fabric of magic, which is essentially science in D&D, to change the game, change the story, influence the story. Now, some as a wizard are really very straightforward. Magic missile, fireball, dealing with damage. But we see a similar thing, depending on the campaign/adventure, something like charm person, or dominate, or illusion spells. You want to create an illusion. Okay, as the DM, well, what do you want to create? What do you want it to do? And that interaction. So a wizard goes beyond just dealing damage, which they do very well, to interacting with the fabric of the game. I see, from the perspective of a DM, a rogue really having a similar impact in the game. Now, not through magic, of course, but through the use of feats, through the use of base class abilities, and the use of certain things that a rogue/thief, or if we're going real old school, thief acrobat, is going to bring to the game, depending on the adventure. So the first thing, of course, sneak attack damage. And this is funny because a rogue without sneak attack damage, it's average damage. It's appropriate for the level, but it's nowhere near a fighter or a battle cleric or even a monk. And that's okay because a rogue is not kind of a primary attack class. Now, you can kind of boost that. You could go finesse-based. You could do dual weapons. You can have other ways, improve criticals. You can get those dice and attacks up there, but you'll never be a fighter. You'll never be a front line. But as soon as you add in sneak attack, and as that scales, and then as we add that on, if you're adding on, of course, magic-based damage, elemental damage on your weapons, various pluses, all of a sudden the rogue is dealing a tremendous, crazy amount of damage. And depending on the situation, depending on the rule set, if you're getting sneak attack damage, you're also possibly catching the target flat-footed, and you could be negating some armor class. So it's this duality of, like, a rogue is either, well, so-so in combat or just absolute crazy beast mode. That's going to take some finesse to play to get up there and get that sneak attack. And, of course, D&D being D&D, we see this with multiple character classes. There's some things that are going to be immune to sneak attack damage, and that makes sense, right? Those weak points and that understanding of where and how to strike that a rogue has, that won't necessarily exist if you're attacking a creature that doesn't have that. But, you know, fighters can attack and there's damage reduction and other things. So we're looking at sneak attack. That's when it's focusing on. Now, I have to say the past couple of groups that I've played with, because as a DM, I like to throw in multiple points for multiple characters. But playing in a group as a player and seeing different DMs kind of play their game, for the past couple of games, I've seen a focus, and I can't say all the time, every time. I have to be aware, and I am aware, that my gaming group and the gaming groups that I play with, both physical, tabletop, and virtual, that's just my meta. That's just where we're playing D&D. So certainly it doesn't account for every way to play D&D, but also looking online and watching other YouTubers streaming their games, which I really enjoy. Fantastic way to see D&D and play D&D, even if you're not playing D&D. I love watching streaming games because I can ask myself, well, if I was in that moment, what would I do? Or being kind of a third-party player to the game and listening it, I can really listen to the DM and the cues from the characters and try to draw my own conclusions about the adventure. What's really going on? What is this like? What's happening? And then from there, easily go out and watch the streaming and see, like, did the party figure it out? Did I figure it out? But jumping in back to the rogue, what I've seen is really kind of like a finesse-based sneak attack, super damage dealer, almost where the rogue is primarily combat. And that works. That can work, and that can be very effective. But in terms of building an effective rogue, are we leaving other stuff, I was going to say on the table or off the table, or not bringing to the table? There are other abilities that are inherent, the abilities for traps, the abilities for stealth, the abilities for deception, or the ability for deception, not to mention a good amount of different skills that you can utilize and feats you can bring in. Why aren't more rogue-based players playing this? Now, this is why I think it has a lot to do with a DM. My adventures, most of the time, if I'm not running a pre-published adventure, there's a mix of everything. I know people like different things and want to explore different things, but I want to have some good role play, actual role play, not just like make a skill check and you auto pass or fail, right? I got a 17. I know the DC's 12, so I'm good. Tell me what the story is. Tell me the truth. No, we're going to role play it out, right? Convince me as a DM. I mean, we still do DC checks, but we want to explore different avenues. So we've got a little bit of role play. We've got that flavor in there. Then we've got some actual role play, ROLL. We're going to roll some dice, roll for initiative. Better get those good rolls on the D20. Let's have like an interesting combat. Then we've got some traps and we've got some things to explore. So there's always going to be a little bit of something mixed in. I'm not going to run an adventure where traps are everywhere just blasting you. It's a little bit unrealistic. It gets a little bit boring, and it kind of slows the game down, at least in my opinion. But I think a lot of DMs, and maybe I'm wrong, if they don't run as many traps, I guess what I'm saying is the focus of the game is seeming to shift to combat, where you're just beating stat blocks, at least the current edition of D&D, compared to, say, previous editions or older adventures. So I feel like the rogue is missing out on these other abilities or focusing just on combat. There's a lot you can do. Or I should say stealth. Stealth is used as a delivery system for sneak attack damage. Well, yes, absolutely. I mean, until you kind of level up and you've got invisibility or ways to shift and phase or, bring in other character assets to do that. But stealth just from the perspective of gathering information. Stealth from the perspective of ambushing. Stealth from the perspective of stealing things. Pickpocketing. I'm not saying go around and pickpocket everything, but there are a lot of different things a rogue can do. And I feel like players are missing out, especially given the diversity of the character class and the things that you can do without sacrificing sneak attack damage. I mean, I think it gets to a point where if you focus primarily on really sneak attack damage, min-max, right? Meta players, min-max, you're going to deal the maximum amount. But if you just tone it down a little bit and spend some character development resources to these other areas of playing a rogue, you're still going to deal tons of damage. Meaning, okay, roll for damage, roll for this, roll for crit, confirm, boom, boom, boom. Okay, I did 87 points of damage. Well, if I wasn't totally geared up for that and I have all these other things I can also do, instead of 87, I've done 79. Well, over the course of multiple combat rounds, that's still a ton of damage. So I want to challenge players to think along the lines of what is everything that a rogue can do? And I'm not saying don't specialize. Certainly player personality, style, where you want to go in, but you have these abilities. This would be, I feel like, similar if I was going to play a wizard and I said, I'm just going to take damage spells. I'm just going to take empowerments that are going to maximize those damage spells. That's it. That's going to be an effective wizard in combat. But outside of combat with charms, enchantments, illusions, there are so many amazing possibilities for role-playing or just figuring out what's going on with that story. The Rogue is very similar to that. Agree? Disagree? If you're playing a Rogue, what does that build look like? And do you feel like the current edition, this is a bigger character question, but do you feel like the current edition of D&D, which of this vlog is 5th, right around the corner to D&D 1 or D&D Forever, whatever the heck it's called, but right now in this moment, do you feel like D&D is geared towards just stats? Monsters are a stat wall and you just blast through it. What they look like, how they act, what they speak is entirely cosmetic. In that case, damage is important. And in that case, maybe you say, look, the Rogue is optimized for this. A close combat sneak attack type Rogue, that is the way to do it.